How much better is the Air 3 compared to the Air 2S? There's a lot of differences between these two drones, and if you own the Air 2S, you might be thinking of upgrading, but there might be a couple of reasons you may not want to just yet. Today I want to break down all the differences between these two drones to help you make a good decision and decide if you should upgrade or not, because newer is always better. Not necessarily. So the Air 2S came out a couple of years ago, and it was a breakthrough because they put a 1-inch sensor that was capable of shooting 5.4K video and taking really great 20 megapixel stills. But because it was a 1-inch sensor, it also gave us really solid and really good low light performance. The Air 2S does have some slow motion capability, but it's limited to 1080, 120 frames a second. It does shoot 5K up to 30 frames a second and 4K up to 60 frames a second as well. Coming in with a top speed of about 42 miles an hour in sport mode, this is about a 22 to 24 minute flight time, depending on how you fly it. It'll ascend at about 13 miles an hour and descend at about 13 miles an hour. So that's not bad. Flies well, it handles great. It has forward, upward, rear, and down facing obstacle sensors. So it does have some obstacle avoidance. It's got some good tracking modes. It can track you from behind, from the side, and from in front, but you have to remember there's no side obstacle avoidance. So if there are obstacles off to your side as you're tracking sideways, you'll definitely crash your drone. Like most DJI drones for the last few years, there's lots of smart features in this, like active track. You can do master shots. You can do lots of automated shot options like drone, circle, helix, all those kinds of things. You can take really good photos with this. You can do panoramic photos. You can do sphere photos. You can do really ultra wide photos. There's just a lot of options when it comes to this drone. And this was one of my favorite drones purely because of this. It's really small and compact when you fold it up, but you still get really great image quality out of it. So it was great for hiking and backpacking and having a drone to document my adventures here in Alaska, but also to capture some really great video quality and photo quality with this little drone. It's been a staple for me for a long time. Now I did sell mine a while back because I moved into the Mavic 3, and I also moved now into the Air 3, which we're gonna jump into next. The Air 3 took a cue from its bigger brother, the Mavic 3 Pro, where it added a second camera, so you get two cameras, two sensors. Both of them are over 1.3 inch sensors. Both are capable of shooting 4K up to 60 frames a second, and you can shoot slow motion in 4K up to 100 frames a second, or 200 frames a second in 1080p. So if you like shooting slow motion, this is definitely a great drone for you. But beyond that, they've made some other upgrades. The flight time has been increased from about 32 minutes, 31 minutes, what DJI says, which is really like 24 minutes or so in the Air 2S, to 46 minutes, which is what DJI says this is capable of. Now, my flight testing, I'm getting more like 38 minutes, depending on how I'm flying, maybe 40 if I'm really pushing the battery to the very last minute. But well over 30 minutes, it has substantially more flight time. Now for a top speed, the top speed in this drone has been increased to 46. I've seen almost 47 miles an hour occasionally, but the biggest change has been the ascent and descent speeds. This drone can ascend at almost 20 miles an hour, 19 miles an hour, which is insanely fast, and it descends at 22 miles an hour, which is ridiculously fast and a little bit terrifying if you're not ready for it because of how fast it comes down. It really drops like a rock, but it's extremely useful if you're trying to get out of the air quickly or if you're just trying to get back to yourself quickly. Having that really fast forward and descent speed makes a big difference when you're bringing the drone back to you after, say, flying around a mountaintop. But another thing that they made a massive upgrade on this drone is 360 obstacle avoidance, which is another example of something they took from its bigger brother, the Mavic 3 Pro. You've got 4 cameras that are kind of faced out in so where it can cover all around the drone, and then some downward facing sensors as well. So you have 360 degree obstacle avoidance. Like all drones that DJI has produced in the last couple of years, this does have a lot of smart features, but I think the best is the active track. Because it has the newest active track, it does really well, and because it had 360 obstacle avoidance, you have to worry about crashing it a lot less. So if you're somebody who tracks yourself a lot like I do, then having this drone really does make a really nice difference. And you can also track in the 3X camera, which makes a really big difference on how you can compose a shot. When it comes to photos, because this has a completely different type of sensor in it, it's a quad Bayer sensor, which means you get 12 megapixels or 48 megapixel stills. And because this has an f1.7 aperture on the main camera, f2.8 on the zoom camera, the telephoto camera, it gives you a lot better performance in low light. Plus, DJI added the night mode feature like they have in the Mavic 3 for low light. Now, it's summertime in Alaska. I don't have a lot of low light, so I haven't really been able to test that out yet, but in the Mavic 3, the low light performance is exceptionally good for a small drone like that in night mode, and from what I've seen from friends of mine, night mode in this is no different. This drone is a bit larger when you fold it up, which makes it take up a bit more space in your backpack than the Air 2S did, but it's not that bad. I mean, it's not that much bigger, and it still fits nicely. A couple of extra batteries than the remote. It's not that big of a deal. Now, really quickly, I want to talk to my friends in the European Union. This drone will work much better for you in your places that you fly for two reasons. It has OcuSync 4, which means you're going to get better signal link even in dense environments because it is much more robust, even though you won't be able to go far as we can in the US just because of the output power ability. But because this has a C1 label and the 81 dB label here, it actually gives you a little bit more freedom on where and how you can fly this drone if you're flying under European Union rules. Now it's time to break down where the Air 2S still wins out over the Air 3 and where the Air 3 definitely beats out the Air 2S. 5.4K is really nice. It gives you a really nice image, and even though you don't have the 3x camera, you can punch in 1.3, 1.4 times if you're working with a 4K timeline and get some pretty nice punched in shots as you can see here. But the Air 3 definitely, if you're going to do zooming, stuff like that, the Air 3 wins because of that 3x camera. As you can see here, this is the normal camera in 4K, even though you don't have the full resolution 5.4K thing. But then when you switch to the 3x camera, it just gives you a whole different way to compose a shot, which is really useful depending on the type of subject material you're shooting and if you want to get close to a subject without being close to a subject. And I think that would come in particularly useful if you fly in the European Union where you have very strict rules on how close you can be to buildings and people. So for video quality, I would say they're kind of neck and neck. It depends on what you're going to use them for. Both of them have great low light performance. The Air 2S has really nice low light performance overall. There's some noise when you start getting up there in ISO, but you can clean it up nicely with something like Neat Video. You can see these shots that I took well after sunset when I first got the Air 2S. But the Air 3 has a new night mode, which does a really fantastic job in really low light, especially if you're going to fly around cities and stuff like that. It just does a spectacular job, and especially because now you have that f1.7 versus the f2.8 on the Air 2S. The f1.7 on the Air 3 gives you a fair amount more light, a whole stop worth basically, which is a lot because then you're talking about going from, say, ISO 3200 to 1600 or 6400 to 3200. That makes a big difference. A big way the Air 3 and the Air 2S differ is when it comes to slow motion video. If you're wanting to shoot slow motion, then the Air 3 definitely wins hands down because you can shoot up to 4K 100 frames a second or up to 200 frames a second in 1080, where the Air 2S is limited to 120 frames a second in 1080. So in video specs, it depends on what you're doing, but I would say right now, marginally, I would give this to the Air 3, but only really because it has the two cameras. The video out of the Air 2S is still really solid and looks great. It's exceptionally nice to grade with the D-Log 10-bit format. It's a great codec, and it looks really good when you work with it in post. But if you're somebody who takes a lot of photos with drones, then there's a lot more to discuss. Honestly, I still feel like the Air 2S has better photo quality overall. The raw photos coming out of this have a really nice quality to them. They're 20 megapixels, but it's a true 20 megapixels. It's not a quad Bayer sensor. You're using every single diode exactly the way it's built. Where the quad Bayer sensor, and I'm not claiming to understand completely quad Bayer sensors, but switching between 12 and 48, yes, you get more detail in 48 and it looks a little better or a little more detailed. In my opinion though, it's not like massively more, like 4 times more detailed. It's really hard to make that call. Another thing I've noticed is that with the optics, and I'm sure this is something DJI could fix in a firmware update, but there is some fringing on a lot of different things. If you see the shot I took in the water here, I had to run the fringing all the way over to get rid of the purple fringe on the highlights there, as you can see. So that's something to think about. I don't run into that issue with the Air 2S nearly as much, and I never did. It just produces really nice photos straight out. So I'd say if you're purely or using these a lot for photos and you already own the Air 2S, stick with the Air 2S. It's still a super solid, great drone. The Air 3 though, if you're doing more things where you're trying to stay away from things, if you're doing wildlife or something like that, then the Air 3 is fantastic because you can get a lot closer with that new 3X camera, the 70mm camera. It gives you a lot more punched in field of view, and you also still get 12 or 48 megapixel photos. Which, while yes, you have to work with them a little more, you get raw photos, you can work with them, and they can turn out really nice, really great looking photos in the end. Then we come to the speed, the flight control, and the characteristics of these two drones. One, the Air 3 is gonna beat the Air 2S easily because it has a higher top speed of 46 miles an hour. You can ascend at almost 5 miles an hour faster, and you can descend at basically double the speed that the Air 2S can, which is insane. Now, that's not to say the Air 2S is bad, but it does top out 41, 42 miles an hour. Your ascent and descent speeds are a fair amount slower, and you can see as I'm trying to get over this ridge here, it took quite a bit longer to get up and over it compared to the Air 3. And because the Air 3 is just that, it's 2 years newer than the Air 2S, roughly, I think about 2 years, maybe a year and a half, something like that. It does have a much finer tuned level of control over the way it feels and over the way it flies. In the last couple of years, DJI has made massive improvements on the way the drone handles when you're flying, especially when you're flying in sport mode and stuff like that, but it just flies better, it feels better, it responds better to your control inputs than the Air 2S does. It's hard to describe it, and unless you spend a ton of time flying drones, like I do, because I do this pretty much every day professionally, it'd be hard to really describe it, but you feel much more confident with the Air 3 than the Air 2S as far as what it's going to do when you make a control input. But the biggest difference between these two is the flight time. To get the shots that you've seen in this video, basically I went through 2.5 batteries on the Air 2S. I went through 1 battery on the Air 3. That's a huge difference. And I'm not saying that there's like more than double the flight time. I wasn't being super precise on how I was flying these. I was trying to match up shots, and sometimes I had one going sitting longer than the other. But the Air 3 has, it's not double, but it's 30, 40% more flight time. It's a lot more flight time. It's almost double the flight time in some cases, depending on how you fly, but it is substantially more flight time. And because of the O4, the OcuSync 4 control, I mean, you can fly this well beyond line. You can fly either one of these well beyond line of sight, but the Air 3 holds the signal much stronger if you're flying in dense RF environments like cities, or if you're in the European Union where your output power is very limited. If you're flying in dense trees where there's going to be signal occlusion occasionally as you dip in and out behind trees, the Air 3 is going to stay much more solid on its signal to the controller than the Air 2S. Another thing that the Air 3 has is you can get these wild parallax shots with that 70mm camera, which just makes it look absolutely insane. And because it tracks in that camera as well, it gives you a whole bunch of options on how you want to compose a shot. But another huge way the Air 3 beats the Air 2S is the up-tilt angle on the gimbal. As you can see here, you can go up to 60 degrees on the Air 3, where you're limited to about 24 degrees on the Air 2S. Now, in forward flight, even in sport mode, that doesn't make a huge difference. You can see here I'm hitting almost 40 miles an hour on the Air 2S, and the gimbal's not dropping. But if you hit a gust of wind enough where the drone has to compensate, the gimbal might drop. But with the Air 3, you can get these crazy up look or up tilt shots like this waterfall or this waterfall, and still flying fully in sport mode if you dare, which I wouldn't recommend. But here you can see where I'm flying fully in sport mode 46, and I'm still able, 46 miles an hour, and I'm still able to look up to 24 degrees, which is insane and mind-blowing. And there is a slight difference sound-wise, and that comes partly that's why the Air 3 has a label for the European Union and why the Air 2S does not. Well, this was produced a while back. But here's some differences between the two drones in the sound. So this is an audio test. The drone is about 6 feet away from the camera. I'm standing exactly even with the drone. And now I'm about 3 feet from the camera, and the drone is about 2 feet behind me. So there you go for audio. So this is the Air 3, about 6 feet away from the camera. I'm directly level with it right now. And then if I come over here, I'm about 3 feet away from the camera, and the Air 3 is about 2 feet away from me. So same distance. This is how it sounds. then it comes down to the biggest factor, which is price. The Air 2S starts at $799 up to $1,050 depending on sales for the Fly More combo, where the Air 3 starts at $1,099 and goes up to $1,549 for the Fly More combo. So that might be a big determining factor for you. At the end of the day, if you own the Air 2S, would you have to upgrade to the Air 3? No, not really. If you're happy with the image quality coming out of this, it's still a fantastic drone, still takes great photos, great video, and flies really well. If your Air 2S is starting to come to the end of its life, or if you need to get more flight time, you don't want to carry around 5 batteries versus 3 batteries, then the Air 3 is a really solid upgrade, and in most ways, the Air 3 is a big, substantial upgrade to the Air 2S. Is it worth it for you to upgrade? It's really up to you how you use these and how you work. For me, this is a worthwhile upgrade because of what I do in my day work with companies, with brands, as I'm running around Alaska, hiking, exploring, working with helicopters, all that sort of stuff, then yes, this is worth it because of the higher speed, the considerably longer flight time, and the better signal link. I still love the image coming out of the Air 2S though. But I do want to know, are you going to upgrade from the Air 2S to the Air 3, or are you in the market for the Air 3? I'll be putting out some more videos comparing the Air 3 to the Mavic 3 and the Air 3 to the Mini 3 Pro shortly on this channel, so definitely stay tuned for those. The Air 3, incredible drone. DJI has done a great job with this thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of stuff I can produce with it in the future. And yes, a pretty spectacular Air 3 review will be coming on this channel. But next, you're going to want to watch this video right here. I'll see you over there. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below, or you can join my live stream, which happens Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern, where we can have more of a conversation and maybe answer questions that I wasn't able to answer in this video. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.